time.
Process.
Okay, so where we left off, were expressing the fact that whatever relief we try to give Pratt Road could create a negative impact on the Nistdale area downstream.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what I'm just trying to highlight is whatever changes we make, it's got to be a systemic approach. And generally, we need to start downstream and work our way up so that we're not just suddenly flushing significantly more water to downstream property owners that aren't able to handle it.
Is this going to change our way of thinking with future developments?
It's a discussion that we can have. Again, it goes back to what storm do we want to make developers design to, with the understanding that the larger the storm we make them put in, the larger their pipes are going to be, the larger their ponds are going to be, the less lots they're going to have, the more expensive the subdivisions are going to be. It's not a simple, let's change one number and not have the synergy effect ripple through everything else. And as an engineer, I can tell you, sure, we can do it. The politics of it, from the business side to the residential side, there's something where I'm glad I can just say, yes, I'm an engineer.
But what about,
You sure? You mentioned a while ago about being on somebody's property and tearing their yard up. We've had an issue up on Line Road where the people on the Delaware side won't let the ditch get cleaned out. Now, we're talking about a two-state issue here that we actually had talked to the governor of Delaware about, and DENREC and all that. Is there a right, I guess is that the word I want to, that we have in situations like this to enter somebody's property when we have a problem like this? I mean, do we have a right, I can't call it a right of way because that's something that's, I guess, deeded or whatever, but do we have the ultimate right to go onto somebody's property when somebody upstream is having a problem to be able to clean out?
So that's actually
In Wicomico County, and
Yeah.
I know I was talking about the Maryland-Delaware
Right.
issue, so.
So that was actually a discussion. We've had the first of a group meetings to try to come up with some strategies and solutions to these, and that was one of the questions that was raised. And there is a tentative maybe answer to it, with that, you know, exactly. You know, if the lack of maintenance is causing flooding on a county-owned road, if it's causing damage,
Well, no, let's not talk
if-
just about a county.
no,
Let's
I
talk
understand.
about
If there is,
upstream, yeah.
it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, it's an implied use for a swale to convey the stormwater, then there is a possibility, and I will just say that it's something that's.
In the case you gave with the Line Road, you have people unwilling to let them clean that ditch. In a lot of cases, our roads crews will contact that homeowner and say, may we come onto your property, clean out a ditch that's causing multiple issues, and then we try to restore it as best as possible. So if we tear it up, we'll put matting down to stabilize it. We'll plant seed. It's not always perfect, but in a lot of cases, we'll have citizens work with us. It could be a tree blocking a thing. It could just be, buildup of sediment. It could be a beaver has built a
we've had
dam,
those problems,
and we get permission to go in and try to remedy the flooding issue by working with the homeowner. So in that case, we don't need an easement. We don't need that.
Right.
We just talk to them, and that's.
But when you have to do more than just clean out a ditch or kill a beaver or whatever you have to do, I mean, when you have to, say in this situation here where you're gonna be down in Nutters where.
Nistdale.
Nistdale, and you might have to do some major renovations down there if you make changes further upstream.
It's,
Is there an inherent right to go onto these people's property and do that?
I don't.
isn't there a 10-foot right, don't we have a 10-foot right of way on the ditch?
I thought we had some kind of
We have a 10-foot right of way, don't we?
You have a subdivision plat that has
Like, means
stormwater easements on it. County can stay in the stormwater easements and do work.
That's if you got a subdivision.
If you have a
Right.
subdivision
But you might
plan.
not have that. You might have your farmer or the situation in Delaware, of course, that really complicates things when it crosses the state line, but
Yeah.
I guess that's my question. Do you have an inherent right to enter those people's property when it's causing problems upstream?
That's a tough one,
Okay.
because there's not code
Okay.
on that in this county, okay?
But there is code in other counties? Maybe if you could review that for us and let us know what we can do
Sure.
to give us that authority if
Sure.
needed, because it sounds like we might need it.
Yeah, it's an issue being discussed certainly right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And there are
that's good
some
to know.
other options that further in the presentation we can, hopefully will help address this. We have some ideas on how to get access.
Going back to the Pratt Road real quick before you go to Kaywood.
Yes.
It appeared to me from being there that some of the areas, and especially the ditches between the picture you showed of the flooding going west toward North Upper Ferry, that there were ditches that actually stopped. And that the water, I mean, if it were ever to even try to, find any relief, there were no ditches.
Yeah.
100 yards west of these properties.
Yes.
That's the high point of the
Yeah,
road.
exactly. A lot of discussion has been about, well, can we throw another pipe in underneath that driveway?
It's not even a driveway, the entire yard, there's no ditch in front of it.
Yeah, again, it's because it's at the high point, the water's shedding down, so that you don't need to put a 6-foot deep ditch or a 4-foot or 3-foot deep ditch when that's the very tip of the peak. It can be significantly shallower, and generally for the first 150 feet or so, water, when it hits the ground, it's doing what we call sheet flow. You've got to get beyond that where it starts channelizing and start forming naturally. And even again, on the sides of the road, with the grading that we do with our road construction, there's enough room to handle small amounts. It's when it gets further on and the water starts collecting in from a larger drainage area that we start seeing the constructed swales. So you're right, there's not, and it's because it's at the very tip of those high points. Now we can certainly go in and construct them. We can throw in these pipes. But what I can tell you is from some of the shots we've taken, the water, in order to go back the other direction and start heading towards Upper Ferry, would have to rise higher than it was in this case. Now, that's not to say that we can't go in and do those improvements anyway. And again, we're going to be taking survey shots of the entire length of Pratt Road to see if it's something that we can do. What elevation do we put it at? Which one's going to make the most sense? So we're not saying no, we're just saying understand that if we put a pipe in there, you're probably not going to see water picking up and going the other direction unless you get more flooding than what we already had.
Maybe if you're thinking from the perspective of the 2.5-inch standard rainfall, but you have to anticipate for the 8-inch.
No, even with that 8-inch, there was water at that high point that wasn't, they didn't have any water in their, they had a little bit of ponding in their front yard, but further on towards, we weren't seeing it. We drove the whole length. I mean, there were sections that were dry, that were up higher.
Are you saying that, sorry. I'll be quick. Are you saying no matter what we would do here, if we had the same scenario happen again, that we would probably have the same problems?
If we got 8 inches of rain on that area and
And
that,
8 inches of rain on top of a 3-inch rain, 5 days later, 3 days later.
it would flood again, yes.
No, but even if you made more improvements.
If we put the pipe in underneath the gentleman's driveway with the current conditions the way they are, yeah, it's not going to change it. Because again, what this boils down to is that system got more rain than it could handle.
But what I'm asking you, are you gonna be able to change the system by putting the pipes?
That's what the survey shots are hoping to show, but even at a 48-inch pipe, you can have a rainfall that exceeds that. And you can go 60-inch pipe, and you can have a rainfall that exceeds that. Again, I always go back to Dallas mentioned we had 14 roads damaged. The bypass was shut down. If people recall, this was the rainfall that shut the bypass down. Those roads, the state bypass roads, like an interstate, are built to higher standards, and we had a major washout there. So it wasn't just Pratt Road. It wasn't just Nistdale.
we know that.
We got calls all along Pemberton. We had, significant roads wash out due to the amount of rain we had.
I guess my,
This has been repetitive here, though. This has been repetitive.
Especially over this last year and a half.
Right.
It's been repetitive, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just the one big rain, which we can all agree is maybe a fluke, but that it keeps happening and that they're afraid it's going to, what's the point of even living there if this is going to keep happening and, the drainage can't be the system, like Joe said, can't be fixed. I mean,
Well, and again, the answer is yes, it can be fixed. That's the easy answer. The question is, how much do you want to spend?
okay.
That's the
And
hard
Nistdale
question.
would be affected, and you're limited by the pipe size because you also have groundwater to contend with.
That's true also.
And if you go too deep with the pipe, you're gonna have water sitting in that pipe 24/7. That's capacity you've already lost. So you could do 15 pipes next to each other. I'm just trying to say, if we were trying to fully prepare for another 8-inch rain after a 5-inch rain on Monday, but then the right-of-way needs are absurd, and the effects of the road driving over that, it's
It's a multi-layered issue. It's not, let's just throw in a larger pipe.
Well,
I
and
like to know that, too.
Well, and I guess that's the question is that, so, and we've probably prevented you from actually getting to this point, but so there's going to be kind of an assessment on this to give us, like you said, kind of get, so here's what we can do, here's how much it's gonna cost. It's up to you guys to figure out if you wanna do that. Is that jumping forward to the end of your presentation?
In a sense, yes. That goes towards one of the bullet points.
Right, yeah, because I think that would be because, these folks wanna know, all right, what's gonna be the answer from the county? And then you guys provide us the answer, and then they get to pressure us as whether or not we, as like you said, the political people, decide whether we're gonna do that. I mean, I think that's the point we want to get to.
yeah.
Yeah, and these studies take time to get the survey work, to look at them right, to do calculations, unlike American Legion Drive, to actually calculate, what based on a certain rainfall, what are these pipes? And it's not as simple as, well, remove that pipe that we think shouldn't be there, or add a pipe over this way. It's looking at, all right, to make water go uphill and head towards Upper Ferry, how deep is that pipe gonna be? How much right-of-way do we need? How many trees do we have to cut down to put that ditch in? Removing a pipe that then limits our ability to maintain the ditch. Well, then the ditch grows up and then it loses capacity because we can't get a grade all in there. So we don't want to make any hasty decisions is ultimately
Right,
the
but,
message we want to
when
convey.
When we lost Barron Creek Road with that storm, I mean, I remember specifically at this table that one discussion we had was, well, the only good thing about this is that we can now develop a plan as to how to address stormwater across Wicomico County. That was over a year ago.
Yes.
So I think the urgency here is much more extreme. We have to anticipate another storm maybe coming in 2 months because we have no idea. But I'd hate to have to visit these homes again and see, 6 feet of water or 3 feet of water in their yards.
Well, with these back-to-back hurricanes, I guess we've been pretty lucky
Yes.
this month. But I guess the big question that people want to hear is, do you have a plan?
Yes. And
We're not letting you get there.
I did not say.
I didn't want to take your bullets from you.
Dallas, what's on the next slide?
I'm glad you asked. So
Well, I read those bullets, and there's a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So South Kaywood, again, the red line here on this aerial is what this one is showing is there is a swale behind the houses on South Kaywood. What's unique about South Kaywood is underneath that swale is also a storm drain. The system was designed relatively kind of a unique situation in that you have a above ground swale that carries the water to several inlet points that then drops that water into a storm drain that's further below the swale and then takes it eventually, like we talked about, to Parker Pond.
And these are the ones that are right directly behind their houses in their yards.
Exactly. So, this is South Kaywood Drive. Now, this area got about 6 inches of rain. I think
Right.
we've seen some of the videos of these areas.
Yeah, I was there.
Water flooded up, very similar to what happened on Pratt Road. Again, just for comparison, almost the same exact shots, and the house on the right in the white is is the Walls residence. You can see what these areas look like in about 2¼ inches of rain. Some of the comments we were hearing early on was, well, the road floods in a ½ inch of rain. And we just want to show during what I think we all used to consider a typical storm, the system is functioning properly.
Right. It was about a year ago, September, that you all went out there and cleaned out their ditches, the walls, and some of the ditches in that neighborhood there. The county went out there.
Okay.
That was before Dallas.
Yeah,
Yes, you
okay.
are correct. The September rainfall was the one that took out Snow Hill Road
Yes.
as well. So that was another big rain.
So, what I just want to show here is these are some of the pictures of that swale behind these houses. You can see on the far right, there's been driveways built over top of this swale. Folks have thrown in little 6-inch pipes that are kind of impeding the flow. You can see in the middle where the water is eventually trying to get to. Now, what you can't really see in this second picture is that there is a pipe at the very end of this culvert or end of that swale that's bringing the water into this inlet, okay? What's happening is on the third side is the water is traveling down this swale, going underneath this rear driveway pipe, and eventually coming into a point right here. Now that's about 3 foot beyond the edge of this back driveway, and at that point leaves, pine shats, sediment has all built up and is impeding the flow through that area, which is why you tend to see water backing up on those properties back there, okay?
So are you saying then putting these small pipes there is what's causing their problem?
Well, the small pipes are not helping. I've met with Ms. Walls on site multiple times, and she's told me they've experienced backups, they've experienced some clogs. When I was there, the simple test, it took a leaf off, dropped it in the water. Was the water going through that pipe? Yeah. Was it hindering the water? Yeah. It was going through, but it would pass through faster. Now, we went out there, this is we've cleaned out part of this swale so that it will reach from the point where you're not seeing any water in here, it now will reach into that pipe. So that blockage has been taken out.
What defines, Dallas, what defines whether it's the county's responsibility to maintain those swales or the homeowner?
It's what's on the plat. When these things are recorded, whether or not they gave us the easement or whether or not the easement went to the homeowners association. And then a lot of times these homeowners associations, especially in these older communities, have gone defunct or people just aren't paying into them.
In this case of Kaywood, is it consistent that it's the county's responsibility from this area all the way to Parker Pond?
No. What's consistent is that what's in the road is our responsibility, and these swales behind the locations are not in our easements. They're not in our right-of-way. It just so happens in this case, there was a large clear area that we could get our small grade all in the interest of trying to help people out. I said, go out there and clear that little section.
Well, most ditches are typically in the front of the house, and these are
Yeah,
behind the house.
yeah. Well,
Well, this falls back
it depends. There are some other locations that I can show you in this.
I've never seen it.
this kind of falls back to Joe's question when he was talking about Delaware. You have a neighbor who has a problem because the house two houses down isn't cleaning out their ditch or the swale. Is there some type of ordinance needed in the county to enforce that?
Yeah, that's
It's part of the
looking at.
presentation.
Yeah, I think some of the enforcement mechanisms, similar to codes compliance, could be helpful in terms of people who kill all the grass on their ditch. They'll just, instead of cutting it because it's too steep, they'll kill all the grass. Well, with no grass there, it's no longer stabilized. You have a heavy rain, it then cuts in. You have dirt washed down, cause a blockage. You have people who actually dump leaves.
You've seen my
And-
next slide,
No,
haven't you?
probably. Oh, maybe.
So,
They do
common
burn leaves.
common
in
causes,
ditches.
okay? These are some examples throughout the area. See, these are some of the, some of them are worst case, some of them are actually kind of typical. Here behind Wainwright, folks have filled in their swale, and you can't even really tell that there's a swale there anymore with trash, debris, yard clippings. Someone built a fence over the swale.
Where was this at?
Wainwright,
Avenue?
yeah. Along Morris Street, someone has gone in and sprayed, or Morris Road, rather, has sprayed weed killer. And by killing that vegetation, there's nothing holding the dirt in place. So when the water goes by, it erodes the swale and it clogs it in, and we see washouts. On places like out here at Cardinal and Meadow Lark Drive in the Hollywood subdivision, they have swales that run between, drainage swales that run between the properties. We reached in there with our grade all as far as we can, but there's about 2.5 to 3 foot of sediment built up into that swale that their neighbors will tell you has never been cleaned out in the 27 years they've been living there. And again, in the case of, all of these, we've got to get our equipment's a grade all. It's 15 foot wide, and we've got a little bit of a clear area on this side, but on the other side, what's typical of the soil through most of that subdivision is it's built up with fences, with sheds, which is why now when these subdivisions get approved and we have a swale, we get them to give us a 15-foot easement, not centered on the swale, but off the top of the bank so we can get our equipment in. One of the things I'm going to propose coming up in future budgets is to get a mini excavator for roads, because we simply can't fit our even the small grade alls into these areas to get them cleaned out. And on top of that, there's also the issue of simply getting a truck in to clean it, to take the dirt out once we've scooped it
Where
out.
does the excavator dump the
Dump it. We
soil?
can't just dump it right back on the side because that's not allowed by sediment erosion control.
In your process of looking at law, I think you need to be kind of cautious. I can understand giving the county the right to go in and do it, but to make the people financially responsible for cleaning some of this stuff out, because what you're gonna run into is a property owner here and a property owner here, with a swale in the middle, there's gonna be a big argument about who should pay for it. So what are you looking at for that?
That's
And think about farm fields where
Right.
you have long
Right.
ditches and it's expensive.
Right, and big wooded lots. Wooded, so what are you looking at? Are you trying to make the property owners financially responsible for that, or just trying to get the right to do it?
Both.
yeah. Let me. Now, you've seen my end slide.
So how did tax ditches fall into this?
Could I add one thing? I'll ask Paul, too. I think of the last 20 or 25 years, most of the subdivisions have been subject to stormwater management agreements
Yeah.
that are recorded, and I believe under those, the initial responsibility is on the homeowners group.
Right.
The county can come in and maintain it, and then I think charge.
But you got farmers out there that.
Well, I'm not thinking of the farm situation, I'm thinking of, what the subdivision
You have two things.
situations.
You have the subdivisions, like Larry just said, and then you have the tax ditch association.
Tax ditches is
Yeah.
completely
And,
different.
that's a whole nother
Yes.
Not all
state of
farmers,
being.
not all farmers are in tax ditch areas either.
I think it would be safe to say that there's probably a greater need for tax ditches because of these storms we're seeing and what road washouts, but establishing a tax ditch association is quite an undertaking. Can be done, but it's quite an undertaking.
It's already been done.
Well, we've got them,
I'm
yes.
talking about more of them.
More,
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, and those are oversaw by the Maryland Department of Agriculture. We've got, I've got a list of what ditches we've got, who the contacts are. Got a good contact over at Department of Agriculture, so, and I've even tapped them to say, hey, look, are there funds available and things like that. But we're getting a little bit
Aren't
ahead.
those reps appointed by the county, though?
The viewers, they call them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole process to establish it, and then there's the operational part that goes on into the future.
Another common concern is that houses are being built in low elevations. We've seen this a lot. People build, oh, look, there's a creek running in my backyard. How nice, how pretty. This is gonna be a great house. Then it rains, and they find out they've just built their house in a floodplain. Or the houses are being built in low-lying areas. What I can tell you is the majority, and I'll tell you about 90% of the calls that we received, and I just want to show you this real fast. This is a stack, every sheet of paper in here is a phone call or email that we received over the course of this August storm. over 300
Right.
of what we've received at roads to try to adash. And what I can tell you is 90% of these are related to either clogged ditches, swales not being maintained that were private, or someone built their house in a low area. And it's,
Well,
And it's not always someone, a builder does and sells it to someone. We had that issue out. on
I
Forest Road.
don't
So,
disagree with that statement.
You know,
Well-
so, I mean, it's not just, you know.
Well, and, I mean, these aren't necessarily, you know, saying a flood zone, but, you know, like Pratt Road isn't a flood zone, but it flooded. I mean, you know, and I know one family had flood insurance, the next door neighbor didn't, you know, so this is,
No, you're right. And again, like I said, you know, that's, you know, that generalization of clogged swale or you built in a flood zone, flooding area, low spot, you're right. I mean, there are certain areas where it doesn't apply. I'm just saying that, you know, of these two hot spots don't fall into that category of you built in a floodplain.
Planning and zoning doesn't restrict that when they issue a building permit?
You know, some of these, again, it's these older homes. I'm not sure what the regs were back when they were built in these older subdivisions.
We had a fellow in planning and zoning that was in charge of the water runoff buildings, when people built buildings. Herman and he retired, did he get replaced?
Herman's been gone for a
Yeah,
while.
no, but did he get replaced? Is there somebody that is, do we have somebody in that capacity that looks at this?
Brandon?
Yes, yes. Yeah, we have a stormwater inspector that he makes sure that subdivision ponds are being maintained.
Okay.
I think it's on a 3-year basis, but
You know, and two, when we see a subdivision plan, we're not seeing individual lot grading plans. We're not seeing how each home builder is going to build their lot and how that's going to drain. You know, when we get these, you know, random one-offs, you know, we can take a look at that, but in a larger subdivision, we're not seeing individual lot grading plans, and it's something that we're discussing. Is it something we need to start looking at to see individual lots? But again, then you're talking about putting a cost onto the developer to develop his grading plans for these lots to then to submit to the county, which goes, you know, there's more cost, there's more bureaucracy. But again, I think in this case, it would certainly be worthwhile to help protect these folks from the flooding.
Can we use something that you have, you've taken pictures, you've got the rainfall amounts for the county. Do you have some area of the whole county that had issues with these floods this time? And make sure that planning and zoning knows those, or health department knows those, so knows about this, so when somebody comes in the future to build, that they can be identified as this was a problem area, so we don't, so nobody builds a house, you know.
But we would be basing that just because they happen to have the 8 inches of rain compared to up in San Domingo had 1/4 inch of rain.
Well, that's what I mean, that's what
But
I'm
they're
saying,
not always
so
gonna get the 8 inches of rain.
what do we do about, say this area here, say his neighbor wants to build a house there, so he's got a perk, or the person that owns it's got a perk, but yet with this situation here, the field's flooded. You're gonna say it's still okay to build a house there?
we've been in conversations with Jack and planning and zoning about how's the best way of doing this. I think currently subdivisions do not require individual lot grading plans. That is an additional expense for a developer that then gets put onto the homeowner, and traditionally we've not been asking it. We look at the overall subdivision drainage, and I can tell you the roads were draining fine. In this case, it's phase 4 of West Nisdale. The lots, however, were built lower than the road.
In some cases, a foot
So
lower.
that water in front of that house there is not getting to the road at all.
Yeah, in fact, the neighbor on this lower picture, you can see the top tip of the house behind these trees. His backyard was flooded. He had 2 pumps running. We met with him. He had 2 pumps running, pumping the water from his backyard into the road, and that storm drain was taking that water every bit as it could. And this is all eventually leading through this. Well, actually, no, this one led to a different pond. was gonna say, it leads to a different, the same one that we saw before, but it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, the road and the drain, we're taking every bit of water that his pump could put out. It's just that the swale, those lots were a foot lower than the road.
I thought there was a time that the state or the county would not approve a house being built on a lot that held water like that.
Well, this was after 8 inches of rain, so in most cases, it's been high and dry. Every time we've been out there, it's been high and
I
dry.
understand it's unusual.
But it goes back to a significant amount of rain.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about is our fixes. There's a strategy called the 3 E's: education, engineering, and enforcement. And the first part is educating the public about, look, don't fill in your swale with trash and yard waste. Take it to the landfill. Keep these areas clear. Don't build up your fences and your sheds over top of these things and clog them up. They serve a purpose. That there's some public outreach that can be going on. We can also talk about the HOA's responsibility. I can tell you out there till Kilburn, I was talking to one of the people on the HOA. I said, we charge $40 a year, and I'm lucky if I get a third of my community put in that $40 to try to clear this out. And people need to understand, look, sometimes it's not just about telling people what color the shingle they can put on their road or on their house, and that's why they're not going to fund it because they want it to go away. Well, you need the money to maintain your drainage. Also looking at lot selection and making folks aware, hey, look, realistically, if you're coming to shore, don't buy a property until you've seen what it looks like in a rainstorm. I mean, it's that, yeah, yeah. Also for how to spot a clogged pipe, and I'm gonna, there's locations where if you see water on one side of your pipe and you don't see any water on the other, that's how you spot a clogged pipe. But if you've got a full ditch running through with water, that's not a clogged pipe. It's the water's going through it. So again, and also talking to people about what this 2, 10, 100-year storm, what these definitions are, so that I was watching a thing on 60 Minutes about the flooding that they have in Houston, and the lady was discussing how they got these 500-year storms and they've happened twice, and it's a statistical thing.
Right.
On the engineering side,
Question, go back to the education. How do you plan on educating the public?
well, I will tell you, it's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. We had a lot of experience with this over at State Highway when we were trying to educate the Ocean City folks to use crosswalks. There was an entire public outreach campaign.
So now they're going to build a fence.
Now they're going to partially build a fence, yes. And the same way we've built it, they're building a fence. I almost put it on the wrong
Route
hat
50.
there. Along 50. Yes, because they work. But it was the end goal. What they did first was the low-cost things of trying to educate the public, and they saw deaths go down. And I think the same thing can happen here if we try to educate the public. It's about more than just taking and putting a static message on a site and saying, hey, well, we put our little blurb on our county website, and that's what we did to educate the public. No, you've got to get out there to events like the Beer Festival, like Seagull Century, like any of the other festivals we have in the county. Put a little booth up and have folks out there hand out some little tchotchke to get people to come over and talk to them, handing them a brochure, putting out little videos to show what things are out there. Public outreach campaigns through things like Facebook and Instagram and getting the word out. Social media is a very powerful tool. There's an entire process that was followed very effectively over at State Highway, and I think we can take that same approach from what was used for traffic fatalities and apply that same tool here for public education, okay? And hopefully that'll help provide better support for the political movement of when we get down to that 30. But when we approach the second E for engineering, yeah, we can make these swales bigger, but it's going to require money, and yeah, we're going to have to get you guys some cost estimates and tell you what these studies are going to cost and how much these things are going to run. So it is entirely possible to go in here. We can sit there and require wider areas. We can look for one of the possibilities that was being discussed that kind of blends the engineering enforcement is, do we do an urban service district for some of these communities that don't have their HOAs doing cleaning out their ditches anymore? Is there enough people in this community that they're willing to stand up and say, yeah, county, we want you to come in and do this, and we're all willing to pay a little bit each year? Again, not looking for the full HOA, but just to go in. Is it, you know, is that a possibility? Yeah, exactly.
Just like lights.
Exactly, just like lights, but providing it for drainage.
Does state law allow urban service to be defined as a public drainage?
In county code, when you look at urban service districts and what they can include, it includes public drainage, or in the case, private drainage. So in an older subdivision who's let their ditches fill up with now old growth trees, we could go in and reestablish those ditches. It's gonna cost money to cut trees and delicately get in there. And then we
Call
can,
them mature trees, not old growth
yeah,
trees.
there you go.
Experienced trees.
Yeah.
I think also it might be able to do a special tax district. Might be easier than doing an urban service district.
Yeah, because sometimes you'll have two houses are flooded in a subdivision, and if you're on the high end, you don't care,
Right.
and you're not willing to pay, and you're not gonna sign the petition to get things started, so it's possible.
Yeah, and that leads into the last part, which is the enforcement side, which is when we're finding these swales filled in, giving folks notes, having code enforcement go out, hey, look, clean your swale out, or you're gonna get fined. And I mean, that's the unpleasant part of it. Or if these communities aren't willing to enter into an urban service district, but their lack of maintenance on their private swale is now flooding and damaging county roads, do we go in and say, look, all right, we're gonna clean it out, and we're gonna have to put the cost to this community or to these homeowners? And again, this is not, you know, I don't have all the answers to every question you're gonna have probably about this process, but these are the ideas that we're thinking about, and what you're gonna see coming forward over the coming 6 months, year, 2 years, are the fruits of this as we try to move forward and address flooding in the county. Because, you know, we started the discussion with the water and sewer, but I can tell you, no one's called me up asking about water and sewer issues. I've had almost a month and a half calls of flooding and drainage issues, and that's been the focus. That's been what folks are concerned about, and we certainly can address them. It's just, you know, this is our plan, and we'll propose something. If you're not happy, we'll tweak it and figure out how to make it work.
I would think that we would certainly make some plans so that we're prepared to suggest what type of funding is gonna be necessary before we get in the next budget cycle.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, that's still too far down the road. I think it needs to be quicker than that. But that certainly should be the ultimate deadline.
Well, I mean, there's Johnny, I don't know if you saw the email from Johnny Mounts. He'd asked the state, you know, he got some state resources that would possible for some help with some stuff like this. And maybe I can forward that to you, but, you know, I mean, there could, you know, be state money, things like that to help with some of these sort of things.
I saw his request looking for potential funds, and there was some interaction with emergency management reached out to me about it,
Okay.
but I've not seen any results that,
Okay. I mean,
if anything's come out of that yet.
I think Tracy Gordy gave some recommendations that DNR or MEMA could have, could probably help with assistance.
So it sounds like we're gonna have to create legislation.
I think so.
So, are you guys gonna evaluate the whole county as far as the plans, and then, because like on the west side, I mean, it flooded up Jersey, Morris, Lake Street, I mean, it was impassable. And it flooded it out, and Patrick Avenue, and it comes from the Cody Cox Creek not being cleaned out. So, that's gonna be
And what's complicated about that is that's not just county and private,
City.
that's county, city, private.
Well, I think
And-
the city's done their part. I think their major part was the West Road, the West Road by Kalamazoo. And they reconstructed it, redone all theirs, all the way up to, down to River, Isabella. They pretty much done most of it.
Yeah, and like we talked about, you know, Lee Alton's been out there. He's been looking through the ditches, and he's found a couple places where it's left us scratching our head because it looks like there's like little check dams built up with some pipes going through, and we're not entirely sure if that was done as part of someone else's stormwater project. So, in particular with Cody Cox, it's something we are looking at. You know, that there are,
You got MDE too.
yeah, you've got MDE. So what we're doing, the approach moving forward for specifically things like Pratt Road, as we're going out and we're doing this, we're gonna collect the survey to see what other things that we can do into that area. It's not gonna just be ripping out everyone's pipe and putting in larger ones. That requires the engineering study. So you're gonna have spot improvements in those locations after we go through and actually do a study and improve larger drainage sheds. But we're also gonna be looking at, you know, these other two E's, the education and the enforcement, and moving forward with those.
Any further questions by anybody?
So,
I got it, go ahead.
when will the surveying start?
We're expecting it to start in October. There's actually, there's a large number of places that we wanted to survey, and we're sending it out to one of our consultant surveyors simply because the in-house staff, the folks that just shot that ditch between Pratt and Pemberton, we're overwhelmed with stuff. So I have to pull guys off of the ditching crews to do that kind of thing. So we have about 6 locations throughout the county that we want to get the full surveys on, and Pratt Road is the #1 priority. We're asking them all for prices. We have 3 consultants. We're gonna ask each one of them for prices at the different locations, and then cherry pick out who's got the best prices for the different ones.
You're talking about education and all that. Bless you. Does the county also need education as far as maybe having some type of town hall in the different sectors of the county to just make sure we're covering all the problems? Or do you think your stack of 3 inches of emails is sufficient for what you know?
I think there's definite value in having drainage town hall meetings in whether it's the various quadrants or just a big one at the Civic Center. You know, I think there's value in that. I think there's value in recording some of this and then putting that up on as a video so folks that can't attend the meetings can click on it and see what's been said. You know, it's the start of the outreach, you know, explaining some of these issues. Yeah, I do feel that there's value in that.
I would think meeting with specific HOAs that exist and are not defunct, but at least go through and say, these are our ditches, these are your ditches to maintain. And then,
Right.
are you capable of doing that?
That
And
seems to
then
be-
that's the conversation starter, in terms of, all right, do they have ditches that are theirs that they're unable to maintain? And then how do we work with them in some format to clean those out?
We've got some developments, or one development rather, where there's, the lady is willing to, excuse me, she's willing to go out and get prices on her own to find out how much it would cost to get her ditches cleaned out, and then send a letter to her homeowners and say, hey, look, it's gonna cost X. If we divide it by all of the houses in here, we each pay Y, and we can get our ditches cleared out and the road will stop flooding. And she's not talking about restarting the HOA and somebody pitching in something every year. It's more of a one-time thing, but that type of community grassroots activism is, you know, puts her in her project at the top 99 percentile of what some of these communities are willing to do. And I think that's a good example to highlight of things that can be done, that if people don't want the government coming poking around in their stuff, that there are other opportunities and avenues. And we're working with them. You know, she needs some shots to know, elevation shots of what elevation these pipes are so that she can tell these contractors how big to deep the ditch. So we're gonna, you know, we'll get her those shots, and she needs some help about knowing, well, where is this thing supposed to drain? So we're helping her with that. And, you know.
Well, the homeowners association, from my understanding, Mr. Wilbur, that's not a voluntary process. If the homeowners association doesn't address it, the city has the authority to fine them.
That is absolutely right. And then it becomes part of the tax bill.
Well, there's your homeowner solution.
And if they're,
The county does it, and then it's prorated out to the whole subdivision on a
Right,
tax bill.
which is, yes. So I mean, the homeowners is the easy fix.
That's your stormwater.
Just for the
easement.
association.
Right.
When we're talking, you said fines and liens for unmaintained swales that flood county roads. Are you just talking about swales, or are you talking about ditches?
swales, ditches, tiles,
Okay,
culverts, whatever we wanna.
Well, I'm gonna use my neighborhood for an example. The road in front of my house gets flooded often, you know, we just put up with it, you know, stay home if we have to. But it drains to a large watershed from Shavox Road through the woods, all the way down to Forest Grove Road. Then it goes into the swamp that crosses Mount Herman Road where the three bridges are, east of Forest Grove Road. So you're talking about numerous property owners between where I live and between where Forest Grove is. And then when you get across Forest Grove, you start talking about different property owners. Then you start talking about the Nature Conservatory. So there's two roads that get flooded there. So who do you
It's-
find?
So
Well,
where,
that's-
and where do
that's a
you,
tax
where do you
So
draw
who
the
do you
line?
find?
And let's say we go in there and your road's flooding and we go through and we find, well, it's a beaver. We're not, you know, at that point, off the top of my head, I think is, well, we're not finding anybody. We're going out and trapping the beaver and get it cleaned out.
There was a beaver problem there. But
Right, no,
apparently it's gone
but
now.
that's the thing. What I can tell you is, I cannot give you a cookie cutter solution
Yeah.
to every problem.
Well,
The
that's-
old saying is, the answer to every engineering question is, it depends. And you can give me lots of, no, realistically, you can give me lots of, well, what about this and what about that? What I can tell you is, the best solution is that we're gonna tailor fit these as best we can. What we need is some tools in our toolbox, and some of these tools will work in certain situations and some won't, and it'll be an iterative process. But it's something that, so in that case, if you tell me, well, we've got this long stretch, and who's gonna be fine? Well, the first question is, what's causing the drainage problem? Is it that there's trash in your ditch, or is it that you're draining to a body of water that has a lot of water built up in it already, and the entire area is just very shallow?
Okay. So
You know-
who do you find?
What's that?
Who do you find in that case?
Maybe we don't find anybody.
Yeah,
Maybe
I would
we
think
see what I'm saying.
the enforcement is the last opportunity.
Yeah.
I think if we can do
That's what I'm getting
something,
at.
if we can
This thing is
educate
gonna be
people, that's the
so-
way to go.
When you start talking about fines and liens for unmaintained swales, now I can see if somebody puts a, dumpster wheelbarrow full of leaves in a swale, or I can see if, somebody builds a shed across
Yeah.
their swale, you got those, but natural causes of leaves falling in ditches or trees falling down through a piece of property, and believe it, downstream from where we're at, that happens a lot,
So,
to have a property owner go in and have to start removing trees in a swamp, is gonna be,
Yeah.
when you draw this up, you'll have to, you'll know that you need to address all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
I mean, these situations over here to the left are where we're talking about, that if somebody said, we go in and number one, we've got the right to ask them to clean this out. And then they say, no. Or we ask them to move their fence back. The cleaning out's the easy part. The harder part is when people put fences and driveways and sheds over top of them, and they run a footer through a post for their shed, and that post pierces one of our pipes
Yeah.
and causes a sinkhole, and this is a completely current situation.
Centennial Village.
Well, we think that, but anyways, the point is, it's not a one size fit all. So there are cases where, and some people have been like, oh yeah, I'll go in there and clean that out. And folks are willing to try to have community clean out ditch days and things. So it doesn't always involve having some contractor come in with heavy equipment.
The other thing,
And just the knowledge of, look, when you get done with your leaves and your grass clippings, don't throw them in that swale. Don't dump them in,
Let me ask you this, can we, so we can wrap this up, I guess we could meet back in a month to get an idea of where you are with the education, the engineering, the enforcement?
I would say that if we could do quarterly, we could do, you want a month, okay. I'll see what I can come up with in a month.
I'm not saying you have to have the total fix. I'm just saying in a month, I'd like to know what the progress is, because there's two things here. One's the direct the direct work that needs to be done in the neighborhoods that you know are problem areas. The second one is the big total picture of the county as a whole.
Now, one thing that I do want to point out is that, I got very enthusiastic when I was talking about the educational side and what we did at the state. There was a staff of 4 folks from our Office of Public Relations and Communication that was handling that project. This was not, again, when we're talking about some of these large-scale efforts, there's a lot of staff time involved. So it's, I understand I can see a vision of something like that progressing, and maybe we can partner with some other departments and, with the Department of Agriculture and their tax ditch work. I don't know, I'm just spitballing stuff here, but what I can tell you is, it's as far as seeing progress on the education side, a month from now, I might just have a blurb up on the county webpage.
Well, the reason that's important is because if we're gonna hold these, if we decide to hold these public hearings, we're gonna need to educate them at the same time as we're getting information from them. We should be prepared to give them the information that you suggest, that you recommend.
Okay.
Another incentive to get them to do it, this could affect their septic systems. With not a proper flow of water.
We've had folks bring up to us, how am I supposed, Miss Walls, how is she supposed to sell her house now when she knows it's flooded twice? It's a disclosure, and that's part of it also. This is, affecting your property values. So it's a spiderweb networked issue.
Well, we have a mailing address, they call it the tax bills. So maybe our next tax bill to send out, we could send out a notice, just making people aware, maybe some kind of flyer in it.
Yeah, we've sent some out to one, the lady that was having took it on herself to get the contractors in to get her prices,
Which community was this?
It was Hollywood subdivision, Cardinal and Meadowlark. She asked us to mail out letters ahead of her mailing to let the folks know, hey, look, there's some responsibility here. And she asked us to do that so that when she goes through and puts her flyers in her neighbor's mailbox, they don't think, well, what's this? Why would I do this? It's a little preamble. So yeah, I could see something like that flyer going out into, or on a more general case, into the tax bills. You're right.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, next item on the agenda is Sharptown, correct?
Oh, I forgot I had another one.
Can the public make a comment on one of these items here?
If you make it brief, normally we don't accept that, but if you would make it brief, go to the podium over here, please.
Okay.
You have to go to the mic. Let us know who you are, please.
I'm Clay Butterworth. I live on Pratt Road, 26691 Pratt. I fortunately was a little distance from ground zero on Pratt Road. I was hoping for maybe some more specifics. I know that would be quick, given the fact that this flood was not all that long ago, but specifics about how to address this rather than being a quarter away or a year away. I know as people in the community, homeowners there are lots of ideas about what could really improve the problem, running it in the opposite direction. But I want to go back to that culvert idea, and it was in one of the pictures that had to do with Pratt Road. If we can go back to that one real quick. I appreciate you taking a minute.
Further back?
Keep, no, go forward. One just, this, yeah. I'm gonna walk up to the picture and I'll talk
Okay.
as loud as I can here.
Laura, we want to give him your mic?
Sure. Thanks. The culvert in question is where this ditch meets that ditch, and it's to allow people to get into this man's yard to get to that ditch from that way. And we talked about the different pipes being sized compatibly, but there was this man's driveway has one of those pipes, but his driveway's underwater. And the road has those pipes, but the road's underwater. But that culvert was high and dry and was not underwater, so I really think, my thought is that that's one of the keys to backing up this water and then having it spread in all the yards like that. And I don't think that's a huge item to address. I was hoping maybe there would have been some information here about, yes, we agree this is the main problem, or no, we see the problem as being over here, or just like I agree with you that I think running the opposite direction and taking it down to Upper Ferry, you're gonna have to go over a big hill and go back down to get rid of that water. But I think on the day that this was all sitting out here and that culvert's right in this corner being high and dry where all the other pipes had the advantage of sending water over the road or over the driveway or over wherever that pipe was, I think that was very telling.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. Sharptown?
Sharptown. So, just turn this off. Okay, so Sharptown has a water and sewer and their engineer and/or town was supposed to be here. So they want to apply for a water and sewer amendment. They want to do some expansion and maintenance of their existing system. They've got some old pipes that they want to replace, and basically in order to get all that done, they need to change their water and sewer plan to address it so they can get potential funding from MDE to help fund these improvements.
Does the county have any issues with that?
No. This is all relatively straightforward. They're not proposing anything controversial. Some solar power, some new pumps, some generators. They're including, I believe, a little bit of additional area in their service areas, because they do mention that they want to provide new means for future expansion. But there's not, to what I'm aware of, there's not a specific project that they have in mind. It's just more of a general upgrade and maintenance of their system.
Any questions?
This is what Sharptown submitted to the county. The county's made no changes.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen, anything else you want to expand on as far as this is concerned?
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
This actually is going to require a public hearing,
Right.
so we can have that November the 7th, because it has to be advertised two times,
Okay,
2 weeks.
good.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
That concludes the open work session. The donation of land, of course, is, I'm assuming that's going to be for another day? Or not? Where are we with it?
We're ready.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so the county was approached about a potential donation of a property. It's located off Connolly Mill, and it is to the north of Henry Parker. We had it appraised, and the return value of said donation, $1,060,000. The site is located within the city limits. It has no utilities going to it currently. Portions of it were used for borrow areas to help build the bypass. It is zoned R8, which is a city zoning that basically allowed for 8,000 square foot lots, which is about 5 per acre. Total acreage is in the 200.
234.
Yeah, 234. So it's 234 acres. I think it's a little premature to say that there's any specific usage for this. I think we see potential for either expansion of ball fields of the Henry Parker complex or some complementary use. It could also be used as a borrow area where it seemed to have suitable material for the bypass. It could have suitable material for other construction projects or even cover for the landfill. It's currently used unofficially for outdoor recreational activities, and we could embrace that and put something similar there in terms of BMX or vehicle off-roading, but liabilities go along with that. And I'll say a portion of it is over the Paleo Channel, so keeping that protected helps protect the water supply there as well. In your packet, you have been provided a copy of the appraisal and the agreement that I guess our main contact with the partnership that currently owns the property is Mr. Smethurst, and he one of the main requirements is that if we are to accept the donation, we handle it all in this calendar year for tax purposes.
He's the attorney.
He's a, I don't know if he's theirs,
I think it's part owner.
yeah, part owner,
I thought you said
Yeah.
owner too.
yeah.
Several people own it, it's all owned.
Well, you made the comment that it could be used for Henry Parker for more ball fields. If you walk that piece of property on the north side of
I've driven my Jeep on the roads there, and it would require some grading, especially with the borrow areas there.
well, that's on the north side.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the south side near Henry Parker.
Oh, yeah, no, the south side, there's a creek there.
Yeah.
It's very low. It's sensitive areas that we wouldn't want to touch.
You're not gonna get any more ball fields.
No,
on
we
the south
would,
side, so.
no, we would avoid that, but, the further north you go, there could be some valuable properties, but I think it would be a complementary relationship to the Henry Parker complex.
What do you mean complimentary?
It would be, expanding the park there.
But you can't put ball fields there.
You can put other resources. The city-owned portion of the Henry Parker complex contains mountain bike trails, running,
Right.
hiking trails, so there could be more of that.
But part of that land is suitable for ball fields potentially, right?
Yeah, the further north you go.
He's just talking about the
yeah,
southern area.
Yeah,
That's,
near the creek,
wouldn't-
you're not gonna wanna go
It
near the
wouldn't
creek.
connect Henry Parker.
The,
It'd be a
the,
separate.
the
have to be a
thought
separate-
is we could have a pedestrian walkway connect over said creek.
Have you walked through there?
I know it's deep. I know it's deep.
You need to take
Joe's
a walk.
walked through there.
We
I
could-
can't imagine.
Well,
Yeah.
Well-
A Go Ape zip line,
Yeah.
from
More
one to-
liability.
Yeah, more liability.
Well, I guess my question
Be
is,
fun, though.
so we have like, Pirates Wharf, County built
Yes.
that 20, 30 years ago. People were trying to use it for recreation. County put up a bunch of no trespassing signs, shut it off. I mean, there doesn't seem, we have a variety of county property that we don't really allow the public to use. I mean, we rent it out. There's some fields that are being farmed. Pirates Wharf, the forest, I guess, is gonna get thinned maybe, but, it doesn't seem to, I appreciate the idea, we could do this, we could do that. It doesn't seem like the county actually does that with any of the other land we own like that. I mean, again, people wanted that in Pirates Wharf. It was put it
Yes.
into that real quick.
Yes.
So, I mean, I understand we could do all this stuff with that, but we got all this other land we're not doing anything with. I mean, if we want to have hiking trails, people at Pirates Wharf were begging the county to do that. So-
Yeah, so speaking on Pirates Wharf,
And I just use that as an example.
yeah, no,
I
it's,
mean,
it's a great example. It was acquired with Project Open Space monies, and the intentions of Project Open Space monies is property open for everybody. I think there was a change in vision in terms of what was proposed there, and most of what's on the river side of Whitehaven Road is in the critical area. So any sort of structures are sort of out of the question unless major efforts are made to build that land up and get the various permitted approvals. I think having a work session with maybe Steve Miller to discuss these, because it's not my expertise, to talk about some of these areas and what we're doing. I do know with Pirates Wharf, as a separate subject, is we're looking at getting a committee involved in terms of what we can do there. A lot of these farm leases we're moving to 1 year so that if we go to do something, we're not impacting somebody's 3-year commitment where a farmer has projected their business into multiple years.
Well, and I appreciate that, and it just seems to me that the county has a pretty good track record of acquiring property for good purposes, we could do all this stuff with it, then it doesn't do that with it. I mean, the park on the west side, the land on, is it Rockawakan Road, off Rockawakan Road? Oh, there's great plans for a park, it's being farmed now,
Yes.
So I'm hesitant to say, oh, let's get more property when we don't have a plan, and we got all this other land that was acquired kind of under the same, I think we bought a lot of the other land, so this is a little bit different that way,
Yes.
but then, 30 years later, we're sitting with Pirates Wharf, and it's,
I'm not as familiar with the Rockawakan piece. I do know when property's purchased with Project Open Space, it comes with a lot of strings, and the ability to offload it because we're not doing anything with it becomes troublesome.
Let me ask you this, the property that's north of this area, do you know what they're using that property for? It looks like it might be farmland.
I think it's just farmland.
Do they have to
currently.
irrigate that property there? Do you know?
If they, I'm not positive with that. If
It's-
so,
well,
it'd be
I think it's
by
a question we ought to ask, because, the only use of this property for the immediate use that might help offset some of the reduction in the loss of property taxes could be if we could lease this as farmland. But as your map says, it has to be irrigated. Just the yellow area. The red area, obviously, they can't farm at all. But the yellow area, from what your map says, it's prime farmland if it's irrigated.
I don't think there's any
No, well,
farmland
the
on this piece of property.
there's farmland between Connolly Mill and the property being donated. It's not part of our,
No.
the tillable farmland that's out there is not part of the donation.
No.
It is, yeah.
I'm saying the yellow, the section that's in the yellow.
Okay.
The soil map, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, the soil, yes, it's on, the soil map.
What page are
But
you?
that's wooded.
Soil ratings, is it, 15, page 15? And it's 152 on the PDF.
Okay.
So the section in yellow is still wooded?
I believe so.
Scruffy.
Yes, it's wooded, and that's actually, that's the primary area where the borrow pits are.
Yeah.
Pits are
So
in there.
if you
Okay.
drive back there, you'll see a significant drop of
Oh, all right,
many
so there's
feet.
no, because
So-
the only thing I was anticipating was, the best case scenario, we could lease this as farmland, but obviously that's out, that's
And see,
it's
if you
going
look at
nowhere.
that,
Yes,
if you look,
I get the irrigation question.
if you look at
Yes.
that, John, to the left of that farm field, that's where the right-of-way that runs in there. And of course, then there's a railroad to the right, extreme right of that property that runs along there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the borrow pit. You talk about using the borrow pit, Weston, it's gonna be tough to get mining permits,
It wouldn't be allowed in the city, and I think the
Yeah.
way it was done here was they said it were stormwater ponds.
Yeah, so, to be able to use it for a borrow pit's probably gonna be a stretch.
Yes.
$1 million, if you agree or don't agree with the appraisal, I think that's kind of a stretch. I think if it was worth that much money, it'd probably been sold. It's a piece of industrial property in the city. I can't, if it was suitable for something, I would have thought, at some point in time it'd been sold. But anyway, $1 million gift's kind of hard to turn down, I would think. But if you also look at, anything anybody gives you is really not free, because you're gonna have expenses in taking care of. For one thing, you're gonna lose tax revenue.
Yes.
10%, I think it's about 10%, if I got my numbers right, of the property in Wicomico County is off the tax rolls already.
Yes,
between,
with state and federal,
yeah, and county
like the
land.
Chesapeake Forest lands that DNR owns,
Yeah,
like those
so,
are large
you know,
tracts.
here's more land going off the tax roll, and back to Mark's statements, we've got land east of Salisbury, we've got land west of Salisbury, we've got land south of Salisbury, we've got all this land that we've acquired over the years with all these visions, nothing's ever been done with it.
And that's something we definitely need to look into,
Yeah,
because
and-
why have it if we're not using it? Sometimes the intention, we had a property, where, off Naylor Mill, it was a house that we had rented for a while, and it was because we thought Northwood Drive was gonna be, continued. And, that's one that we're looking at parting with, because the road's not going to be expanded. But years ago, that was the intention. They acquired this property as part of it. We're not in the house rental business. We're not in the farm rental business.
Well, you got a house in
But-
Powellville you rent. So I think we are in the house rental business, but anyway.
Not intentionally,
I know.
not
Okay,
intentionally.
okay. But,
So yeah, it's those that we want to look into, and I really think looking at every county-owned property and just say, oh, are we actually using this, or is this something we can offload? Again, the project open space purchase properties, you know, it's an ordeal. It can be done, but it's an ordeal, and we need property that we're gonna transfer it to, so.
you know what this property would be good for? This property would be good for the state to own, for a state park.
Maybe we can make a donation to
Yeah.
it, Joe?
Well, maybe these folks could.
When we need to write $1 million
let's
off
do it
our
this tax
taxes,
year.
we can,
Yeah.
donate to the
But
state.
what I'm
But
saying,
yeah,
And then we'll donate
I
it.
mean, when you look at that north, the south side of that property and the way that land's laid out with the, you know, it is beautiful. I mean, I've walked it. I've made a couple trips out there to walk it, but I don't know that our rec and parks is set up to do. I mean, we're more into ball fields and soccer fields and things like that, and that's more of a hiking, biking type situation. Do we want to get into that? Is that something that we need to get into?
And I think the ultimate use is something that we can
Yeah.
speak about. What we have before us is a group that's looking to donate to the county, and being,
One thought would be is if the county took the donation, but decided we have no good use, you can always figure out a way to offload it to state or a private concern
yeah,
or something.
or we could always sell it.
Never happened,
and then-
Paul, come on.
So here's the situation, if I understand it. Somebody wants to give us $1 million, and because we don't want it, or we don't need it, we don't think we should accept it. But it's encumbered because they are paying $18,000 in taxes, if I understand correctly. And $18,000, it'll take us 50 years to get to $1 million. And in 50 years, none of us will be here. And in 50 years, I hope we can decide what to do with the property, that it'll be worthwhile. Now, because it's unencumbered, Mr. Wilbur's right, we can go ahead and sell it anytime we want, unlike Pirates Wharf, which we cannot sell. Because it's,
These folks haven't been able to sell it.
no, well, even if we get $500,000 for it, we've still come out $500,000 ahead. I mean, it's foolish not to accept
Well, you know-
$100 million or $1 million.
$100 million, whoa.
Yeah.
I kind of agree. I'm looking at this real seriously and thinking.
I am too.
You know, I'm thinking, how do you turn down a gift that's worth $1 million?
Sure.
But
Or
you're also taking
500,000.
more property off the tax rolls. And how much land should the county own?
50 years to
You know,
at $18,000 a year.
I was hoping that we'd have a more exact idea of some type of plans for usage of this near future, 10 years out. I mean, I would like to treat it like it's a purchase as opposed to a gift and say, okay, it's $1 million that this property is going to be, that it's been appraised at.
Yes.
So what benefit is it to the county? What's the best use we can get out of it in the next 10 years?
Use what it's currently being used for. It's got a built-in revenue source right now. If we just monetize the ATV park that's already established there with a built-in clientele, we can instantly make money on this property.
That's the kind of answers I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really trying to find out where the revenue stream could be.
But the question is
But the-
does the county want to get into that? I agree with Matt. It's like, let's look at, or really, let's analyze what natural resources are there and how do we capitalize?
Right.
So the thought is there's existing ATV, there's existing borrow pit areas. So my thought is it could still have usable borrow that we could use on projects. It could be, let's capitalize and, I have a Jeep, so,
But something a
wondering how much
little,
they'll pay to ride their bicycles on it.
something a
I'm
little,
talking
some-
ATVs.
Well, it's ATVs.
Well, same thing, I mean, how much
No,
they-
no, not really.
Pay $1.
Does that?
something a little more than.
have a permit
Could
or
be.
something that people get, and
Absolutely.
you just periodically spot check to see,
We
are-
talked
do
about
you have
this
a permit?
last meeting.
right, listen.
Off-road at acetate.
Yeah, because we're kind of spinning wheels. Let's say, let's make this decision in November, but between now and November, let's have some realistic options as far as what we think this property, we can do with the property temporarily for a revenue stream, and what we can do with this property for the county, long
And
term.
that's why I asked complimentary. What do you mean complimentary? Because I would hate to turn down this property and then 5 years down the road, we need it and can't get it, or it's gonna cost us a fortune to buy it.
And someone has suggested it could be used as an RV park for the Henry Park Complex, but that's not gonna happen over the Paleo Channel.
Looking at the.
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, looking at the topography and the fact the borrow areas are there, I don't see that being
All right,
I
ingress,
mean,
egress.
maybe a part of it, but again, I think it's a stretch. The closer you get to the creek, as Councilman Joe said, it drops off significantly. So that's gonna limit whatever we do. And a pedestrian bridge may not even be warranted there.
Yeah, I mean,
given-
that
given the-
had been discussed before, that you could put a bridge over this creek. I mean, Joe's been there.
Yeah.
Joe says that isn't gonna work. So we really need some realistic answers.
That's the only holler on the eastern shore, I think.
The last
It's
remaining.
an interesting piece of property when you walk it, it really
The only
is.
comment I'd make is the proposal that the owners have made is they want the gift to be complete by the end of the year.
Oh, I understand.
So
We don't have a lot of time.
That gives you time to
That's the
think about
farmland.
it.
We're gonna have like 2 more work sessions before we have to, we're gonna have 1 more work session, then probably a decision's got to be made at the second work session. So I would say the first meeting in November, we would really need some specifics on what the county thinks they wanna do with it.
Well, Weston started off saying there's no plans. That was your first statement, right?
I think it's premature to say. I mean, we haven't had time. Pirates Wharf, for example.
Yeah, I mean, if we
We still don't know what
Yeah.
we have a farm lease.
So I'm afraid in
and-
2 weeks that we're gonna end up with something that somebody's just thrown together to convince us to take it. That's what I'm afraid of.
I'll say, yeah, the taxes that we lose per year is to the tune of 18,585 and 36 cents is what I was given. And as Councilman Hall mentioned, yeah, in 50 years, what we've lost in taxes and assuming a 4% interest rate roughly, you're talking $1 million at 50 years of taxes lost. So if we do anything in that 50-year time frame, we come out financially ahead. $1 a permit per ATV, I mean, really, we want something more to cover from a liability standpoint, as soon as somebody breaks their neck out there, but, it's,
I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about that, and I think about the stock car races and the drag races in Delmar, and this is a motorized sport where, when you talk about the lay of the land, it's gonna be pretty dangerous, so we're gonna have to have an ambulance there when people are riding, I mean, is
That's
that
really a legit question.
Yeah.
How to best
Right,
prevent
right.
liability.
So maybe we need to talk to legit before we make any plans about, ATV park,
Yes.
Find out
Yeah.
what the.
I don't think there's any around, so it's probably a good idea.
Well, but that begs the question, though, if it's such a great idea to have an ATV park there, why isn't this being used privately as an ATV park? I mean, why isn't some businessman out there saying, hey, why
It's being used privately, it's not being monetized.
Well, yeah, but
Because
that's,
they don't wanna carry the liability for it.
Right.
And it's probably
So-
being
so-
done illegally.
yeah, but,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so,
But there's
probably
other-
trespassing.
there's a reason.
Well, it is, absolutely, they trespass every day.
Yeah, again, I mean,
Are these ATVs or just bicycles?
ATVs.
I think part of what comes with any ideas as to the future use of the property would also have to include the infrastructure. What type of infrastructure commitments are we gonna have to make in order to, monetize this property or whatever else we decide to do with it.
Yeah, with any option, yeah, we're gonna have to look at all the all the costs to get it up and running, or?
But we need something, I think, a little more specific in November, first meeting in November. We don't have much longer before we have to make that decision.
So yeah, when this donation came and the executive was interested, its proximity next to Henry Parker, we got the appraisal and we reached out. So we haven't had it much longer than we've presented it to you.
Right.
So
You got
yeah,
something else to think about when, if we end up with it and want to turn it into ATV park, you're gonna have the environmental community all upset about that. They're not gonna be happy
They're
about
already
it.
doing it.
Huh?
But they're already doing it.
Right, but they're not supposed to, but they don't know.
It's government land, it's different.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
theirs.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll have the set aside section where it gets down by the creek. That'll be the nature walking area.
Okay.
We'll give it a
All right, November.
Trade the city.
November.
I'll have Steve Miller here.
You probably should have had him